Кога амбасадор на Европската Унија се наоѓа меѓу писатели и разговара со писатели, тогаш времењата се добри, независно од тоа колку тие времења всушност навистина се добри или лоши. Имам чест да го поканам да ви се обрати заменикот амбасадор на Европската Унија, господинот Џулијан Васало. Повелете.
Благодарам многу. Најпрви се извинувам малку што ме почекавте додека да дојдам и што не е тука Дейвид Гир, кој што инаку е амбасадорот тука по Пладнево, туку јас сум наместо него. Амбасадорот Гир имаше некои несрекни приватни вести денеска и ме замоли јас да бидам на негова место. Знам дека тој многу сакаше да биде токму по Пладнево со вас, меѓутоа еве сакам сепак да споделам неколку размислувања што тој сакаше да ги сподели со вас, но јас ќе ги кажам. Значи, почитувани писатели, љубители на книгата, дами и господа, задоволство и привилегија да сме денеска тука во друштво на писатели, чија слава излегува и надвор од регионот. И луѓе кои што си ја ценат својата работа и кои што се тука исто така со нас онлайн. Исто така, овој фестивал ја слави литературата и има обединувачка и трансформативна сила. Преку книгите учиме и се препуштаме на фантазијата, размислуваме, сонуваме за самите себе си, за другите, за светот во кој живееме. Исто така, валидираме или можеби повторно ги проценуваме нашите уверувања и свесни сме дека нашите желби и загрижености се помалку или повеќе универзални. И во таа смисла не сме единствени, не само кога зборуваме за толкувањето, туку и во нашите стремеши. Исто така, тука и делот на културолошката размена, што е во суштината на европската идеја, разноликоста во културата, во јазиците и во размислувањата е нашата најголема вредност. Тоа е извор на синергија. Всушност, беше писателот на романите кој што ова го знаеш уште пред да биде и замислена ЕУ, а да не зборуваме да биде формирана како таква. Визијата на голем број на познати писатели од крајот на 19-тиот и почетокот на 20-тиот век, како што се Виктор Хуго и Херман Хесе, придонесе значително за постојање на концептот на ЕУ. Тие не само што ги воспоставија своите културолошки надежи во Европа, туку исто така и знајдоа многу начини за да воспостават европско чувство на заедништво, кое што исто така ќе биде израз на гордоста на различноста на народите. И тоа е се уште работа во тек. Овој фестивал се гради токму на таа основа. Тој ги обединува на едно место авторите од овој регион, од сегашните и од идните земји членки. Исто така ја подобрува интелектуалната размена и исто така е веројатно да инспирира свежи идеи и евентуални одговори на заедничките поединечни, а пред се општествени загрижености. Темата на оваа тркалезна маса е литературата во времето на поствистината. Тоа е тема кој што можеме да кажеме дека и политичка, особено во ова време кое што многу се карактеризира по
I'm also wishing the participants who have an enriching exchange throughout the entire festival, and the book lovers to receive many new good reads as a result of it. Thank you very much.
Ви благодариме за честа што сте со нас.
It is an honor to have you here.
I have crossed oceans of time to find you.
За да те
Ова е
пронајдам.
една од најпопуларните,
It's one of the most popular,
широко познати
widely known
реченици во
sentences
литературата се разбира
that exist in the literature.
книгата Дракула.
Of course, this is taken from the book Dracula.
За многумина е
And this book, for many
најромантичните,
people, is one of the most romantic and the most,
реченици во
most romantic sentences ever written in the literature.
Затоа што
Mainly
ликот кој што го
because
кажува
the
тоа
character
Дракула
who is saying this, which is in this case Dracula,
лик кој што
is a
навистина
character who
во
indeed,
смисла
in
на
the
спорот,
literature sense of that
доаѓа океани
word,
од времења
is crossing oceans of time in order
со
to be
својата љубена.
together with his loved one. So this is something that a common person simply cannot do.
Значи, со самата таа поставеност
So with this
би можело да
structure,
се каже дека
we could also say
таа
that
реченица
this very sentence
може да ја фрли во вода е дури и целата љубов
can
на
even
Romeo
throw out of the
Romeo
window the
и
entire love
Juliet.
between Romeo and
Колку е
Juliet.
силна
It is so
љубов.
strong as such and very nice as such, etc.,
Проблемот
etc.
доаѓа
But the
кога
problem
би се почнало да
occurs
се размислува
when we would
од
start
аспект на тоа
thinking
дека
from the aspect
да, тоа е,
of,
се воред
yeah, okay, this is all fine and this is
No,
indeed like that, but
тие атрибути на
those
романтичен
attribute of a romantic person or love or similar are essentially attributed in this case to a pure evil. As we all know, Dracula is not even an anti-hero. He is a representation of pure evil and that's it.
ова
But
не е најдобар пример.
This is not, of course, the best example that could introduce us into this topic, and we all know that this is also not an aspect from which this literature work should be considered and reviewed, but it is, I think, a good example that can prove and that can show the roots or the origins of Vladimir put on the round table for this year, and for which I think is ceasing to think. Or, to put it even more concisely, the moment when the people are embracing or accepting the truth out of the given facts, out of what is given to them, without even thinking about that. So just embracing it, accepting it in the form as it is, as it looks like, and not how it should be. But of course, this is a very, very small part of what Vladimir would like to discuss with you today. So I would give the floor to Vladimir, please. Thank you, Dejan, for this excellent introduction. Dear writers, dear guests of a FEDA Fellowship program, I wish you all welcome. Those who are here, I would try to talk as least as possible and to leave the floor to you as much as possible, because we are exactly here to discuss, to have a conversation about your position. What I'm going to give is just a short introduction into this topic. I would call it an encyclopedic introduction into this topic. So this term has become popular in the last years, especially in the period after the most recent presidential elections in the US and after the Brexit referendum, and it definitely acquired its wide use and popularity back in 2016 when the Oxford Dictionary has declared it a word of the year by relating, it says that it is about marking some consequences in which the relevant facts are less important when it comes to shaping of the public opinion compared to the personal opinions and emotions. So I think that the actual definition of this word is very exactly showing the attitude of the relationship the literature is building, or rapport the literature is building with the word. The question of shaping of the public opinion, the political manipulations, and the ideological manipulations, which are some of the key aspects which are related with the concept of post-truth. If we take a look at this from the aspect of the fact that some particular concept is supposed to put into question and even deconstruct certain aspects in the society, and also in the world that is around us, that relativism of the generally accepted concepts and postulates, it seems that it was always something that the world needed. And even the relativism was leading the world towards some new areas. And essentially, in some time periods, certain thinkers and scientists not to agree with the then present state of affairs. However, on the other hand, this particular concept is very seriously brought into relation with manipulation of reality, which includes incorrect facts, lies, deliberate spreading of misinformation, especially on the media, and especially I refer to the unconventional media or the social media. The post-truth or the concept for post-truth is essentially related to today's Western society, which it seems that it is narrowing more and more when it comes to the concepts of the radical opposition and the black and white simplification, which on the other hand could be also serious challenges for the democracy the way we know it. By the way, the relationship between the truth and literature has been out there since the very beginnings of the literature itself. Let us remind ourselves that in the very initial writings of literature, it was essentially seen as an expression, as a manifestation of the truth, and it was considered that the things that will be expressed through the poetry are, in fact, more stronger materializing the truth. It was the similar when it comes to the relationship between the literature and the characters, where the difference between the spiritual, between what is loved on one side and the artistic on the other side is something that simply doesn't exist, this difference. And the same goes for the very first religious texts, the so-called epic writings, in which there is almost no difference between the truth that is shown in the literature and the social reality to which it refers to, but it is even stronger. The text or the literature is making even stronger the idea of the community about itself, and ultimately it is sharing the common truth or conveying the common truth. Luckily, some 30 centuries after these initial literature texts, which from then point of view maybe we cannot call them literature, but today there are called literature works, things have changed significantly. The literature has conquered many different areas, but in the same time lost the privilege to be the only conveyor of the truth. So now that difference has been made, that we're talking about a distance between a scientific truth and other truth. So most probably this is okay. In terms of all these initial aspects, I would like to invite Mircea Cartarescu, who is this year's winner of the Proza Balkan Award for the Balkan literature, to share with us his attitudes and opinions on how he is seeing the today's relationship between the literature on one side, and on the other side, these, I would call them quite intriguing and quite controversial aspects of the time of post-truth, time in which we currently live in.
Thank you so much for giving me the word. The topic that we have today touches, in my opinion, the most important philosophical problem that we, the humans, have. What is truth? What is reality? What is the connection between reality and truth? Are they the same thing, or are they different, or are they even opposite to each other? And I would like to start in this discussion from in my opinion, again, the most important talk that two people had in the history. And this talk is just about the significance of the truth. You can find this fragment in Lucas' Gospel, where Jesus talks with Pontius Pilate. And he brought in front of him, he told him that he was sent in this world to bring out the truth. And the Roman deputy of the emperor by that time answered with an amazing sentence. He asked, we don't know whom, he asked Jesus, he asked himself, he asked a general question that is universal. So he said, what is truth? I think this is the most important talk that the people could have ever. From this discussion, which is fundamental and archetypal, I would say, we can conclude that truth is not something to be found in this world. Truth, the real truth, the hard truth, the I would say the universal truth, can only come from above, from au-delà, from other parts of our existence than the world. The world itself has no hard truths. The world himself is confined only to this question: what is truth? And all the fields of knowledge, the science, the religion, the philosophy, the arts, literature among them, and all the others have not ceased to ask themselves this question: what is truth? Is it in our world real truth, or only, as you said, relativistic truths, only emerging truth, only truth in movement? And if we jump over some time, we find Descartes saying another fundamental thing: dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. This is also an amazing thing, because it makes the distinction between truth and reality, the reality of yourself. So you are not true if you know the truth. On the contrary, you are true if you doubt the truth. So it was a revolutionary thing, I think. Descartes does not base himself in his feeling of himself on truth, but on doubt, on the reverse of the truth. So we humans, as compared with the cats and dogs that Milian mentioned yesterday, we humans do not have a truth. We only search for a truth. The cats and dogs have the truth. They have a real truth. They exist. Existence without reflecting on the existence is the truth in a way. But this truth is transcendental. We cannot express it in words. The cats and the dogs cannot talk, cannot think. They only are. So I think this is the most important thing when we discuss the so-called post-truth epoch. I'm asking you, what epoch was before truth? What epoch was not post-truth? What epoch gave priority to truth? And you'll find no such epoch in the history of humanity. We always make bricolage of our knowledge. We doubt facts even. You said that facts are fundamental, and post-truth means giving priority to feelings and so on instead of the facts. But the facts, are they true? Are they really true? in a standard novel, there's a soldier in a battle, and he doesn't know even in which battle he fights. He doesn't know if he's on one side or on the other side. He finds himself caught in that battle. For him, there's no battle of, one of the Napoleon's battles, Jena battle, or I don't know which one. For him, it was a landscape, people who died in front of, at his back, horses that were rolling in the mud, but no fact, no battle. The battle was actually created by the historians. I don't believe this. But this is a theory. It's the postmodern theory of history. If you ask Gianni Vattimo, for example, or Jean-François Lyotard, or some other, Giscard Petain, some other philosophers of postmodernity, they will say history is not reconstruction, it's simply construction. History is not true, it's not real. You cannot touch it. It's something that we have today, and we will deny it tomorrow. We'll rearrange the things that we call facts. So what is true? What is truth? What is this chimera that we always follow and never put our hands on it? It's like the thing in itself in Immanuel Kant's philosophy. You can never touch it. You have a relative truth, which is what your senses get, and you have the big, strong stone of the real truth, but you cannot touch it. You never touch it. This is a philosophic point of view, and we could, in a way, insert it somehow in our discussion. Thank you for the moment. This is what I wanted to say.
Mircea, this was wonderful. Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction into not only the topic, but you also started to deconstruct the topic as such, which I liked very much. I found your speaking very fruitful. Now let's shift gears a little bit. In the context of what Mr. Mircea mentioned, there is a story written by our guest here, Oliver. It's a short story, so I'm going to read it in its entirety. It says like this: if we continue tailoring of too big or too small truths, we'll never be able to get it right in terms of the right number of the people. Instead, we need to take their precise measures, because they are the body of the text. The truth are only nice, but they are passing clothes, and we are the tailors, and we act as tailors when the suits are perfectly suiting on our bodies, regardless of the fabric. In an interview that was published in relation to Oliveira's great novel called Abbott, she's gonna say, the writing spontaneously added at the end of my realistic life of my father, with whom we continued together through the fiction, because the fiction is our common home for all our truths. By the way, this reply is something that reminds me of some things from the novels called Father and Rod, written by Mr. Milan Kujarakovic, but we will talk about that later. Oliveira, what kind of truths you find intriguing in your literature, and what kind of truths you need in your life?
Истината во литературата не ми е некоја неопходност, ми е потребна само.
I don't find the truth to be really necessary in my literature work. I find it as a yeast, as something that needs to start to instigate the snowballing of the whole thing. So I think that the writing is exactly this pruning of things, to prune the fiction on the fact, if we start with the fact, or vice versa, we start with something invented, to start pruning on it or adding to it some truth that is within us. Since I was a child, I found it very exciting. Those fruits, you would see the older people, they would prune. Like you have a peach tree and they would prune a plum on that. And then you have one tree with two different fruits. And then you harvest them. And I found that very exciting, to be honest. And right now, as I'm thinking about the fact, I don't think about the fiction anymore because, I don't think about it at the level of a storytelling practice. We could start that from the side, either from the peach side or from the plum side. In the novel that you mentioned, which by the way is just conditionally written about my father, but essentially the most important thing that I wanted to achieve with that was the lie. It starts with the lie. The main character wants to dig a well, where everybody's telling him, no, there is no way you can dig here, it's too high, too steep, there is no water, why would you dig here anyway? But he was determined to dig the well anyway, and this is exactly where he wanted to do it. It is not sufficient for him to do it violently, but he wants to cover himself with someone else's truth, and everybody's telling to him that yes, you can dig the well where a butt is growing. It's a Kumanovo slang. It's a wild thyme plant. Whenever there is this wild thyme growing, it means that there is water under it. There you can dig your well. So the main character of my novel knows that. So in the evening, in the night, he goes without anybody seeing him. He's collecting the whole thyme. He's planting the thyme exactly on the place, on the location where he would like to dig it, and the lie is starting. The next day, the experts for the well are coming, and they can see, oh, there is a thyme growing here, and they're telling, no, you don't dig here. No, you will dig here, and the character is saying, no, but it is very steep. And now they're convincing him into his own lie like it's the biggest truth. And the main character, my hypothetical father, is even opposing the lie that he started. But they're convincing him to start digging there because there is the truth. So this is the essence of my storytelling. But in general, I can say that what I'm writing is exactly the attitude between different things, to prune one thing on another, either fiction on fact or vice versa. I find it makes no difference to me, and they're usually equal in my writings, regardless what I'm gonna start with or what I'm gonna do, what is peach or what is plum, as I said. Thank you, Oliveira. There is one place where Haruki Murakami says, most of the people are not even in quest of the truths that can be proved, but rather the truth is very often accompanied with intensive pain, and almost nobody would like to hear the truthful pain. Instead, what the people need are nice, comfortable stories which make them feel that their lives make sense. Mr. Ante Tomic, what is the relationship between the truth and telling nice and comfortable stories instead of telling the other uncomfortable stories?
I
don't know whether we can talk in the first place about some pleasant or unpleasant truths. When we are seeing this most recent case, these people who were against the vaccination, against COVID, on one side you have belief, a very comfortable belief, that there is a painless solution to the virus, who is painless, free of charge. We're going to get vaccinated and we will be protected. That is the one truth, one belief. On the other hand, this is opposed by some horrible, dark and disturbing story about some theory of I don't know, some Bill Gates, that we will all be chipped and we will all be conspiracy theories, our liberties will be deprived, etc., etc. Personally, I believe it is a lie, but it is an uncomfortable lie. It is very bad lie and very disturbing one. So whether the people would like to believe into a comfortable lie, I'm not sure. You see, people would sometimes even believe in very uncomfortable lie. The question is why? Well, I was thinking about it. I don't know, do I have the right answer to it? But what it seems to me is that the people simply want to believe in an intentional lie. You have people who believe in viruses and vaccines, and we think that, or we say that the disease just happened. It landed from the bat, it came from animals, it was a random or accidental infection, etc., etc. So what is happening to us is a fruit of some nonsense or some chaos. And then you have, on the other hand, the conspiracy theory, which is very similar to a religion. You believe that someone created, engineered that virus, or some hidden, invisible force has created the virus, has created the disease, and someone is managing the whole thing. Someone is supervising our lives. In the religion, it is the God, and here you have Bill Gates. Simple as that. In the conspiracy theory, Bill Gates is the omnipotent or omnipowerful being that is watching us all the time. And here we've got some intentional truth. That lie gave us some sense in this chaos that is happening around us. So that is why I think it is quite attractive to believe in conspiracy theories, because it is giving a sense to this chaos. It is putting some order into this disorder, let's call it like that. There is somewhere a logical explanation why is this whole thing happening. But when we're talking about this post-truth, as you mentioned, there is one thing that I find especially interesting. We're here now in Macedonia, from where there were some indications of that in Macedonia there was a mass fabrication of lies, because of which Donald Trump won the elections in the US. Those were fake Facebook websites which had some defamations or something. It was all happening in the town of Veles. I don't know if someone investigated this further. I find it as a very interesting topic as a writer, you know. I mean, to have some people, we're talking about juveniles, children juveniles in Veles prevented Hillary Clinton to win the presidential elections in the US. Imagine that. Even as a lie, I find it fascinating, and let alone as a truth. And this is really what happened. And everybody's recognizing. And this is also a thing that Barack Obama believes in. He's mentioning this in his memoirs, that it is because of that Macedonia is to blame for that. I don't know whether the Macedonian government or the Macedonian people, did you guys apologize to Hillary Clinton for what you did to her? But the fact remains that I don't know what was happening afterwards, but maybe you would know more about that later. Okay, thank you, Ante, for this jokingly. Yeah, Donald Trump had a tweet in which he thanked those guys in Veles in Macedonia. Yeah, indeed. I assume they did not have a key role to play, but probably they played like 0.1% role in the whole story. But it is still interesting anyway. When we're talking about comfortable or uncomfortable stories, which on one side are disturbing, but on the other side should also offer us some vision, or at least some vision too, because we're trying to find some sense in this chaotic world. I am thinking about children books, although, as it was mentioned yesterday by Milenko, the best books for children in the same times books for adults. But I always have this dilemma, how in those books for children to strike a balance between realistic realistically talking, the cruelty of this world, which is in the same time cruelty towards the children, and also, I mean, cruelty in terms of the relations the children have with the world around them, and with the relevant level of cruelty or unpleasantness or discomfort that a child, regardless of the age of that child, 3, 5, 10, whatever, needs to get, because that is the only way in which that child is going to learn about the world. And maybe indeed the world consists all those elements. Maybe Joanna Nicolai can say something briefly, because she's a very successful writer of children, and maybe I should ask her this question about the relationship of these dark aspects that exist in the world on one hand, and on the other hand, the world of children books, where in no case the world of children books mustn't be a world in which fake stories for to the children will be told.
Yes, yes, yes. And now I must speak about literature for children. I will try. I can show you this kind of illustration. I think it's very cruelty, very much realities in this book. You can see also on the cover. It's very, very cruelty. So. I show you this book because sure I write for children, but I think this kind of literature is a free literature, and I think just before I thought before coming here to a story of Borges. I think you know this story. It is called The Mirror and the Mask, and it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful parabola about literature, and it's about a king, the king, high king of Ireland, that had a battle with the Norwegian. And he defeated this Norwegian, and the High King spoke to his scout poet. It was the best poet ever, the most known poet. He asked him to compose a song about this victory, about this battle. And the poet had a year for this, and after a year came to present his panegyric. He declaimed it confidently, without a glance of the manuscript. The king praised him and gave him a silver mirror. So the king gave him a silver mirror because the king saw in this panegyric fidel battle. And he was very impressed. But the story continues, and the poet must write another panegyric. He will make this, and at the end he will die. But now I'm interested in this kind of silver mirror, the literature like a mirror. The literature like reality, like the common truth that enter in our pages. and I think it's possible, this kind of literature. We have a lot of this kind of literature. It is very necessary in literature for children also. We need to know about, I don't know, how live child from a community from India, maybe. How live Malala, maybe. How live other children from the world. But in my literature, it's very important the other level. I need that the literature be a mask, also a mask. That's why I write also for children, because I am very free there. There I put my mask. There I'm going in other words. I invented other words. I work with fantasy very much. I am very free. I live there. When I write a book, I am inside. You know very well what about I'm saying. I stay there for a whole year. I don't know, and I am very free there. In my other books, I don't know. I use the word truth only in this book. This book is my last novel. It was published 5 months ago, and in the interviews, I said that I was interested in truth, because here is my my childhood in 80s in Romania, in the communist regime, and it was very important for me to tell the truth. No invention, no fiction, too much fiction. I have a child, and my child asked me when he was, I don't know, 15 years, how it was the communism. I wrote a book to answer him how it was my communism. And the truth was important. In Romania, some months ago, was published a history of literature, very interesting, because it was for the first time when the author considered that the literature can be read it from the left side of the ideological. And in this history of literature, he found only an author of children literature, only one in a whole literature, because it is only one he write ideological. That's why I think the ideology is the worst thing in literature. The literature is not ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, for the very interesting positions related to the urge to write. And about the writing itself, I think it very nicely fit this entire mosaic of opinions that we have right now. I would just like to ask now Gojko Božović, who is a poet, literature critic, essay writer and publisher, because I think this question fits best for his attitude as an author, as a criticism person. It seems that the question about the post-truth is somehow related also to the question that has been trending in the recent years about the drastic reduction of the relevancy of the education as such, and even beyond, about the knowledge in the social area. the educational system is now not only losing the quality, but it is the idea itself is diminishing and declining on why the education is important. In the country where you're coming from, which, by the way, don't worry, it's not much different if we compare to the neighboring countries. It seems that too many things are converting into, we call it estrada. There is a lot of tabloidism, there is a lot of strange things happening in the public life. So how it is possible in such an atmosphere to be, on one hand, a publisher who is publishing serious books which you do not want to succumb under this estradization of this entire aspect of life, and in the same time you are a poet? Does it mean that the poetry has been reduced to something private because the presence of the poetry in the public discourse is not so present, and the poetry is something contrary to the estrada and to show? Some 50 years ago, an American sociologist really foresaw the occurrence of the public man. According to his opinion, it was an ideal citizen who is critically thinking about the society and culture, and who is in some way indeed active, very active, I would add. But in the post-truth times, we are witnessing the existence of a so-called tabloid man. It is a total contrariety to the public man. If the public man is a critical person and active in the political and social life, and if he is economic entrepreneur, if he would like to simply extend and expand the limits of his own freedom, on the contrary, the tabloid man is everything against. He doesn't believe in any authority, and if we're talking about authorities in terms of knowledge, education, and higher culture, in the same time the tabloid man doesn't believe neither in scientifically verifiable facts, neither, and his main feature is apathy, and very often he rejects any sorts of dialogue because the doubt in the dialogue could win over his truth about the life he is living. In a political sense, he's confusing person. He's quite confused as a person, and he's missing the opportunities to shape the political influence. Also, in the economic sense, he's a simple consumer, and he's egoistic consumer. And in a culturological sense, he's consuming only tabloid content and mass culture. So, ideologically speaking, that man is a populist man, sometimes even very radical one. And we've been seeing in the last couple of months that in the large cities, in different countries, there are huge movements that are happening that fight the science, fight the scientific achievements, or fight the vaccines, or things that have been already proven to work. And on a first glance, what is happening? What is going on with these guys? But we can see that no matter what is going on, we can see that they are not apathic, but they are converting their voice into something more louder. And then we will see that the rest of the people are not fighting against some particular power, but they're fighting about some global conspiracy or some global power. And now we are coming to the very essence of the system. They don't want to change the politics, the government within specific frames, but they are fighting against something abstract as a content. And here, the conspiracy theories very nicely fit in. Conspiracy theory is the content of the post-truth era, and they are equal to corruptive content because they make it easier to the people during the times of high crisis, because this is a time of a very high crisis, to more easily accept the world in which they live in. People who refuse to believe the conspiracy theories, they are critically seeing and verifying facts. Whenever there is some information or content, they still have to shape their critical attitude about that. They need to separate or dedicate specific time to get informed, and on the basis of that time and information, to shape a critical attitude about that question. And you will admit that this is not always an easy thing to do. And in that ocean of information which we are surrounded with, we actually have a very big demand to take a critical standpoint towards the things that are surrounding us. And this is one of the key reasons why there was a breakdown not only of the authority of knowledge, but why there was a breakdown of the critical thinking as such, in all sorts of different forms, starting from the literature, artistic critics, political, social, economic critics. So in other words, the critical thinking is not the dominant opinion. It is not even acceptable. It's not even desirable. In many situations, it is not even politically correct, because it is bringing into question the actual structure of the world we live in, and it requires from our people to set their standpoint about that. On the other hand, we have the post-truth and the theories of conspiracy theories and different types of those shaped truths. What is their starting point is that once an image about the world has been created, that image should stay as such, and the person who has accepted some post-truth on any question, on any dilemma he has, on any challenge, he will always give the same response. And that response is a kind of a rounded up picture about the world, because it is easier for him. There is no effort involved, there is no personal responsibility, he escaped from his personal liberty, etc. If the facts do not match or do not fit this post-truth, in that case, as they were saying during the communist time, well, let the facts die off, because the post-truths are very nicely go hand in hand with the new mass-scale technologies and the new media. What they do is that everyone's opinion has the same usability. A number of different opinions do not have to be related to any types of facts or to any type of critical thinking or any type of dialogue. But on the other hand, the post-truths are something totally contrary to the literature, because we're talking about lies that have to become socially mandatory. On the other hand, the literature, by shaping possible worlds, and also by reminding us to the real world, what is requiring from us is that whatever some novel is saying about us, it is something that we have doubts about. And that is the difference of the literature. The literature is always calling upon us to cast doubt and to continuously be doubtful about those things. On the other hand, you have people who believe blindly about all sorts of different things. So we're talking about essentially opposed things, and those things are opposed to the literature. Thank you, Gojko, for this quite clear and precise, surgically painful overview, I would call it, you provided us with about the time in which we live in. Milenko, you said yesterday that there is no greater illusion than the one that there is objective reality out there. And that is true. But in terms of this question, what is the true position? What is the true measure between the idea that there is no objective reality and the manipulations of the reality in which we live in that very often come from certain ideological and political positions? For example, coming from the far right or the proponents of the conspiracy theories or anti-vaxxers, etc. Unfortunately, it is not the question only about the far right. That is not the only problem. Unfortunately, the things cannot be seen in a way that the bad guys are wearing black and the good guys are wearing, I don't know, pink, red, you name it. The most recent large-scale campaign about the vaccinations, and in general, this is a global campaign about the COVID-19. This entire story about the epidemics is essentially showing that that the craziness of the far right is not something that we could be talking about anymore. Instead, we have a craziness that is very nicely and equally distributed and allocated along all sorts of different political and ideological formations or entities. Now we have the craziness of the right, we have craziness of the left, then we have the craziness of the green, etc. When we take a look at the structure of the so-called anti-vaxxers movement, at least here on the Balkans, that structure is very interesting. For example, in Croatia, you have anti-vaxxers, or all anti-vaxxers are war veterans or potential war crime perpetrators from the wars that have been waging in Yugoslavia during the 90s. And what they are saying is that in the vaccines there is something that would impose a genocide on us, usually against the Croats and the Christians. That is what they say. And this was what they said just this Sunday. They had this most recent gathering. It was said by some war veteran, someone who was very prominent as such. And then you have the Greens, or you have these alternative Croatian leftists. There is an opinion, or amongst the extremists, there is an opinion that there is a poison in the vaccine, that poison is a consequence of the aggressive campaigns waged against us by the pharmaceutical companies who did not do their job properly when it comes to vaccines, because the only thing they think about is money and profit. We mustn't take into us something that has not been examined, let's say. And instead, what we need to do, how we need to treat ourselves from COVID, just use homeopathy or whatever. And there you have this impressive homeopathic theory, like it can cure you and all those crazy ideas. So in a nutshell, you just drink a glass of water and you will be cured from COVID. And this is what they actually believe in. So this is something that is very peculiar. I don't want to mention some other examples, but there is a whole spectrum who has been contagious or tackled by this craziness. People are decisive to think, to believe into something that is crazy. Now, I have to admit that I am a bit sensitive when it comes to this word, post-truth. I am a bit sensitive about this post-truth in the times of the Donald Trump, and also in the times of the ferocious criticism against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump essentially didn't do anything new. He was just doing more aggressively things that have been implemented already before him, and something that in some periods of time or in some moments of the European history of the 20th century used to be even more prominent. The way in which Donald Trump acted and the manner in which Donald Trump was creating facts out of nothing was in fact very similar to the way in which that was done in the National Socialistic Germany in the 1934-1935. In a very similar way, they were producing some kind of a new mythology, some kind of new popular belief, because Donald Trump was essentially a creator of some people's belief, and he was quite relatively successful in doing that. And what our problem with him was dual in nature. First, our problem towards him was that he wasn't a president not only of the United States of America, but he was also a president of the world. That's one thing. And our second problem with him was that we, unfortunately,
evropske provincije,
people who are coming from some God's forgotten place or province from Europe, and to us, news from Washington and news from the world are the only colorful sensation of our puny and petty lives. I'm not talking about the private lives, but I'm talking about the lives of our TV stations, internet portals, etc.
taj problem
And suddenly this problem
post
of the post-truth became essential
naših života.
problem of our
Sljedeća stvar,
lives.
čini mi se
Another thing which
svega ovog
I find interesting is that behind all of this we have
što je gotovo
something that
to je
is
gotovo infantilni problem, nešto što je
a quite an infantile problem,
infantilna nevolja.
or I would call it an infantile trouble of today's humanity.
Naime,
What I'm trying to say with this is that
u školu
before you start going to school,
vi živite u svijetu
you
slobodne
live
mašte.
in a world of free
I
imagination.
onda krenete u školu
And then you
da vas
start
prvo
going
što
to
vas u
school,
školi
and the
nauče
first thing that will hit you in the
da
school, that is what they will
imaginacija ne
teach you,
može biti
is
baš
that the
toliko
imagination cannot be
Imaginacija ima neka
that
pravila
free
i
as you
neki
thought,
zakon.
that even the imagination is
I onda
subject to
vas
some
krenu
rules and
učiti
laws.
kako se piše
And then they
slovo
start
A.
educating you how do you write the letter A.
Imaginacija
And
zaustavlja,
here your
jer
imagination
slovo A
stops
je samo
because
ono
letter
slovo
A
A
is
kako vas
exactly
nauče
that
i
how
nema-
they are
nema
taught
dalje.
to write it, and there is no other way of
što se
doing it,
nama
you know?
danas događa
So what is happening
je
to us right now
kao neka
is like, how should I put it, some kind of crazy return to childhood
broj ljudi
in which a huge number of people
potpuno nekontrolirano i
are
potpuno divlje bavi
dealing
zloupotrebom imaginacije.
with abuse of the imagination and totally uncontrolled in a totally
Zloupotreba
wild way.
imaginacije, šta je zloupotreba
What do I mean by
imaginacije?
abuse
Zloupotreba
of imagination?
imaginacije je to,
It is,
da ja držim,
when I am holding this object in my hand,
ja ga neću ispustiti,
and I will
jer
not let
ja
it
znam
fall
da će on
because I
pasti,
know that it's
možda
gonna
će
fall.
poletiti
Maybe
u
it's
vod.
gonna fall on this glass, then the glass could fall. The same for the bottle.
Meni govori
And
da
you who are
ne.
abusing my imagination,
Vama
you're
se to
telling me,
čini,
no,
taj
no.
predmet neće past. On
You
će
think that
ostati
this
tu.
object will not
zraku
fall.
da
It is
stoji.
going to remain levitating in the
tako.
air.
To je
That
moje
is
mišljenje.
my
Ja
opinion.
eventualno mogu,
And what I could eventually
sa
do
vama,
is
raspravljati oko toga hoće li predmet
discuss with you
ili neće.
whether the object will fall down or not.
Bivamo prisiljeni
So
da
we are
raspravljamo o
forced to
stvarima
discuss about
kojima je
things
besmisleno
about which
raspravljati.
there is no point to
Besmisleno je
discuss.
raspravljati
There is
postoji
no
li
sense
sila zemlje
whether there is a gravity
Besmisleno je
as a force of
raspravljati o
nature.
tome,
There is also there is no sense
imaju
to
li
discuss
vakcine
whether
smisla
the
ili
vaccines
nemaju.
make sense or not.
Besmisleno je
It is
raspravljati o
also
tome je li
pointless
zemlja
to discuss
okrugla,
whether the earth is round or not.
sve rasprave iz
And all
takozvane,
discussions from the so-called
post stvarnosti
post
i post
reality
i post istine
and post
ere
truth
zapravo,
era
rasprave o
are
stvarima
essentially
o kojima je
discussions
besmisleno
about
raspravljati,
things
jer
for
je
which there
riječ
is no point to
naprosto
discuss,
o činjenicama.
because we're talking about simple
Činjenicama.
facts there.
Činjenica je da je
It is a fact
kamen tvrd,
that the stone
da
is
je
hard,
pamuk mek,
that the cotton
i
is soft,
činjenica je da neko
and it is
ima
also a
plave
fact
oči,
that someone
neko
has
ima,
blue eyes, someone else
smeđe
has
oči. Oko
brown
toga ne
eyes.
možemo-
It
ne
is
možemo voditi raspravu.
something that we cannot
Cijela
discuss
ta
about.
priča o
So this whole story about the post-truth and this whole story about the post-Trump world is essentially
Frustrujuća
a disturbing
upravo iz perspektive
story exactly from the perspective of literature, because
to destruiranje
this destruction
svijeta,
of the world,
destruiranje
this destruction of the
destruiranje iluzije stvarnosti,
illusion
destruiranje
about reality,
istine je
this destruction or deconstruction of the truth is leading
destruiranju mogućnosti
towards
pričanja
destruction of the
destruiranje-
possibility to tell
destruiranje
story,
mogućnosti pripovijedanja.
destruction of the possibility of narration, and ultimately this leads towards destruction of the reason
jer sve
for
i onako
narration, because everything will become fiction anyway. Everything will become
rasprava o vakcinama.
discussion about the
Vakcinama
vaccines.
koje će vama pomoć,
Vaccines that will help you
zato što na vas djeluju,
because
neće pomoć zato što na
they
mene
have impact
djeluju,
on you,
ne djeluju,
and they
zato
will not
što ja
help me
znam
because they
da
have
je
no
u ljudima
impact on me.
čip, bila
They
teza
have no
da je u
effect on
ljudima
me
genocidni
because I
otrov,
know that there is a genocide poison in the vaccines, or I don't know, the microchip created by Bill Gates that will destroy all the Christians and the Croats, and I know, simply know, that the vaccines are poisonous. And this is crazy. It's like being in an asylum. And asylums are not places that look like the ones from the movies. It is not fun. It is not entertaining. The craziness is not surrealistic. It is boring. And what we are discussing right now, and what is happening to us as we speak, is a horrible, gray, boresome, and this is almost equally boring as the most boring horrors of the Stalinism. Thank you, Milenko. I hope that we will be able to continue to discuss these aspects. Diana, the question that I wanted to ask you was in the context of what was mentioned by Goiko, and in relation to the tabloid man, the situation of the tabloid man in which we all live in. It is a society of, as we say, estradization of everything, of the culture, of the mass media, of the politics, of the show business, of the literature, when very often the value of the authors depends on their ability to be present on the market, or to be present on the social media, on the websites, and even on traditional media. And the literature is something else, of being in the spotlight and all those shiny bells and whistles. So how it is possible to act as a literature agent in that sense, to represent authors, but in the same time not to fall into the trap about talking only about one specific author in the context of this showization or estradization of the culture? I'm sorry, but I cannot hear. She needs to turn on the mic. Okay, now it's okay. Thank you. So this is the primary and the most important relationship between the text and the reader. Estradization is everything that we are dealing with as a literature agents or as publishers. This is an added work, and this is something that is happening in parallel with the literature. Estradization is a stage. In 2004, let's say in the decade of tens, with the new century, the first festival of alternative literature was established, and there we've been talking about the estradization of the literature, we were talking about that as something negative. Of course, it showed to be rather the contrary, to be exceptionally positive, and we need those types of events. And what we, as literature agents, I can talk exactly from that perspective, what we are doing is exactly in some way estradization. In other words, we're dealing with the way in which we show or in which we discuss about complex and multi-layered literature works. Let's say we're talking about books in general. The writing of Burba, as you mentioned, is an art per se. And there is a very short text it is a skill to convey the spirit of a literature work in such a short text and all those shades and layers, and it is a very complex task, and it is an art in itself. There is no publisher, not even a book agent, will refuse the social media, or writer who is using the social media, who is also trying to promote his books on the social media, but at the end of the day, when we are talking about what matters at the end are the books and what is included in those books. The social media, the different platforms, the festivals are just a media of using things and to reach towards things that we find to be important for us. So I think that the literature is one of the things, or one of the activities which include, if I can say that, much more truth than this very particular reality we live in. Thank you very much, Adriana or Diana. Many times the participants today have raised the issues of manipulative aspects of the truth and our attitude towards the truth. So my question towards Andrei Hocevar, who is in the same time poet and who is also working as a literature agent, representing certain authors from the region. And it was my idea to wrap up today's event with you. Andrei, what do you think? Is it possible today, let alone necessary, to talk about the truth, and what would that mean?
I guess, as you said at the beginning, literature has always been the place of truth, but somehow it doesn't seem to be the only place of truth anymore. And I also think that the truth in itself, as Mircea said, is as something transcendental, something that cannot be conveyed, is also beyond propaganda, because there is no choice. Truth can be just out there somewhere, with us being unable to fully grasp it and to fully comprehend it. And again, we also know that the very question of choice is in itself, in fact, a consumerist category. So just the fact of having a choice and building your identity around it means succumbing to a consumerist society and the values that it holds. And I guess this is something that is far removed from literature, at least in general. And yes, I don't have so much difficulty talking about literature than I do about different truths and post-truths and whatever. Even though I really respect all the hard work that people are willing to put into promoting vaccination on social media and fighting those who oppose it. But I just don't see myself as ever being able to do something like that. So, however, when it comes to literature, I guess literature is always true, and at the same time, it always fails in its attempt to convey the truth. And I guess what literature teaches us is to fail better at trying to understand and convey the truth in whatever sense. And something that has stricken me as interesting as of late is the vast number of texts dealing with not truth directly, but everything that falls into the category that we call autofiction, which is a way of saying that a certain piece of writing conveys a certain type of truth, namely my own truth or the truth about the writer, the author. But again, I think we have enough writers present here who have written about this. For instance, Mircea has somewhere has written something like, I'm just quoting out of the top of my head, like his narrator says that he's always writing about himself, but this is an illusion because it's impossible. And it is in fact this illusion of writing about yourself, of writing about oneself, of writing about the truth that I find so fascinating. I have just recently been dealing with certain Slovene authors, so authors whom we have published, and at least 2 or 3 of them, they wouldn't say that they write autofiction, but their work got me thinking. For example, there was a novel, let's call it novel, by Brina Svit, a Slovene author who writes in French and translates her own work back into Slovene. She wrote a text about a woman who was trying to get over the pain that she felt at being rejected as a writer, so being rejected by a publisher. And she goes to India to do some sort of healing, and then COVID strikes and so on. And I thought this was brilliant. And one of the words that I love the most is narrator. So I was talking to the author and I say, this is so brilliant how your narrator goes there and is, for the first time in her life, she's trying to deal with rejection. And the author said, no, don't use the word narrator. This is the author, this is me. And I was thinking, have you never been rejected before? Is it possible to read a novel by an author who has been so successful, and it is now that she's conveying to the readers that she has never written a manuscript that would be rejected? I thought this was impossible. So I still stick to the word narrator. And then there's another writer, Miha Mazzini, who several years ago published a novel called Childhood, about the author's childhood, we presume. And it's subtitled A Novel in Short Stories, which is in itself a contradiction, but again, it just makes it so much more interesting for the reader. And in this book, again, we have this narrator who has all the, who is very similar to the author, and the author said, this is me, I have never written about myself, this is a way of trying to overcome this fear and these obstacles of diving into one's own childhood and the traumas that it presented. Again, I would prefer the word narrator, but he says it's about him, so it's about the author. Maybe just one last example by the same author. There was a different novel about a political scandal in Slovenia that erased, as we called it, a huge number of people the government just didn't want to acknowledge, which has recently been translated into German and has the subtitle or the genre of true crime. It hasn't been labeled as that in Slovenia. So these are examples that show me different degrees of truth and different ways of dealing with the truth within literature. And as we also know, truth in a way, the truth, the one truth, has become, I guess, an old-fashioned word. Here I'm thinking about many, mostly Slovenian and younger poets who are desperately trying to write against their poetic forefathers, trying to kill their idols, you know, because they are seen as a group of people, the old white men, who have control over truth. So we don't want to acknowledge that. So we need to invent a different style of writing. So even the style of writing is, in a way, a testament to the truth that a certain piece of writing is trying to convey. I find that fascinating. What I don't find so fascinating is the way how lately it's not always a question of knowledge, of truth, because opinions somehow carry the same weight as knowledge. And suddenly someone's ignorance, the level of someone's ignorance, can be the same as the level of someone else's knowledge. And that just doesn't compare. But this is a symptom of the times that we live in. And if I come back to literature, it's kind of similar to the question of critically assessing a piece of writing, and then you have literary critics on one side and just general readers on the other, and there's always this clash, you know. The critics should be the ones who have read many books, who know how to use language to describe literature, but we just don't believe them. When I say we, of course, I don't mean myself. I believe only in literary criticism, not in general opinions. But there's this huge pool of readers that just don't care about what the critics say. They just have their opinions. And suddenly the world is full of media and portals that don't care about literary criticism, but just try to tell the truth about how good a piece of writing really is. And these people, these readers, these portals don't do it in a language that would befit a literary critic. It's just, you know, things like the feels and what it gives you personally as a reader. And again, this to me is a sign of the times in which knowledge is the same as ignorance. You just need to try to convincingly convey your own opinions, whether or not they hold any truth. And this is something that is really bad for literature. Just to finish with a more funny example, I don't remember who it was that told this to me. I don't remember which piece of writing this was about. So ironically, you cannot believe me because I don't have any proof anymore. But there was a writer who told me that their children wrote a story or a novel or whatever it was that they wrote, and they asked their parent if it's true that they in fact have a brother or a sister, because they never knew it. They just read it for the first time in this piece of writing. Of course, the author made it up. But this is the power of literature that made the writer's own children believe that there are other siblings just because the author has written about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Would like to thank Mircea, Ioana, Milenko, Goiko, Oliveira, Diana, Andrei Hocevar as well for all your contributions, guys. I really enjoyed this event, and this is one of the best aspects of Proza Balkan, where I can sit together with the writers from this region and discuss these literature or less literature related topics. Thank you again for your presence. Maybe Dejan, you can close it, or we are done. Dejan has nothing more to add. Excellent. Thank you, Dejan. So let's continue discussing about literature in the next 2 or 3 days. I consider the event closed.